get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. Rhythm in our love, it's impressive, excessive. You can't make this stuff up. My chest beats, it's restless, wakes the neighbors up above. Yeah, baby, come and show me love. Baby, come and show me love, because you're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
We can get on a plane and take a one-way ride, steal us away to find a place we can hide. It wouldn't take much to disappear for a night, to give into the need and leave it all behind.
'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. 'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. You're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. You're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. Suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
And welcome to Inside the Numbers, folks, with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. As always, at this time of the month. Oh, there's George. Let me bring him on. So I got Peter and George from the Gaggle. As always, it's a pleasure. Guys, thanks for joining me today. There's a lot I want to get to. All right, we got polls, we had recent elections, and we have protests all over the world going on with these vaccine mandates. So, I got to be honest, I'm an American. I'm a little bit shocked at some of these protests. I am. So I'm glad to have you on here tonight, get your insights. Thanks for joining me as always, really. How you guys doing?
Good. How are you, Richard?
Living the dream as always. Living the dream. I think today, I think probably should start at the story of inflation, which came out today, which was the consumer price index, the producer price index. Wholesale inflation always comes out a day before. And I'm going to show that after. First, I'm going to show the consumer price index. And I want to make a point. I hope I don't forget it going through like the whole spiel of what it is. But I'm just going to show the back of my EverViz. This is how we track stuff on, there we go. This is how we track stuff at PPD and People's Pundit. We use EverViz if anyone's interested. It's not a sponsor. Don't give me crap on my Twitter feed. I'm just telling you it's a really good tool. And just looking at this, guys, let's just do the 1 year. All right. Look at the 1 year. All right. So for everyone in the Biden administration and everyone on Twitter, if you go back and look at the trend, we had a serious distortion. We can even go back to, that's 1 year. Let's go back to 2019 on October. And then let's look at how you can see the shutdown caused a serious distortion. And then that distortion corrected during Trump. And everything was back on its normal trajectory. And then along comes the Biden administration and everything goes to pot. And I can't understand, you want to look at a PDF, guys, and anyone can play with the numbers in a PDF. This month in October, it was 0.9%, which I believe that is one of the highest ever. It may be the all-time high. I have to go and look, but the 6.2 on the 12-month is the highest in some 30 years. So, play around with the PDF, play around with the numbers, but when you look at the visuals, and I'll go to you first, Peter. When you look at the visuals, it's clear, and I don't know how people can try to distort this crap. It is what it is. A lot of the economy has to do with mindset and the mentality of what people expect things are going to happen, and how companies make decisions based on their forecast for the future, not for what's going on right now. Not always. Not it's probably 90-10. I'll throw it to you, Peter. What do you think of this inflation number? It's going to have a big impact.
I'm really glad you started out with perception, because that is the most important thing here. What we had during the lockdowns, depending on the degree where you were living, people, particularly people like ourselves, it was kind of difficult to spend money. I mean, you can just buy so much takeout, right? And so, and we knew that the supply chains were slowed down. Things I wanted to buy online from abroad, it went from 2 weeks to 2 months, 3 months. I mean, it just, I'm still waiting for stuff. Okay. Yeah. And so you have people that have money in their pocket, as it were. And then there's this perception now is that the Biden administration and the powers that be are not taking this seriously at all, and that the country, there's a majority of people, I don't like to use numbers in front of a pollster, but a majority of people now believe that the U.S. economy will go into recession next year. So what are people doing? They're buying what they can buy. And then there's also the real middle-class working people tax of energy prices that is really, I mean, this winter, this administration is going to be pulled through the coals, as it were. Okay, so but a lot of it has to do with perception. There's a lot of bent-up demand, and obviously because of the supply chains that are completely in paralysis right now. People are going to buy. The more you go out and buy, the more scarcity there is, and then the more price goes up. I mean, it's called simple economics, supply and demand. What really is bothersome for me, and George and I have talked about this repeatedly in the Gaggle, the administration doesn't seem to take any interest in it at all. I mean, they're in the most esoteric, pronouns week for the U.S. State Department. I mean, this is. This is so real. George knows I always bring up the example. We're not arguing about going back to the moon here. Okay, we're not having this discussion. Just go to the West Coast and get in an air balloon and look at all those ships that are just sitting there. Okay, and the president has a lot of executive power. Biden could go in there with the National Guard, could go in there with the military. There's a lot of things you can do. You can really the strategic energy reserve. You can tap into that. That's what it's for. Okay, I don't understand the paralysis of the people. And then you have Pete Buttigieg. I mean, that's what is he doing there? Okay, I'm sucking up all the oxygen. George, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I was going to throw to you, George. I mean, now that he's back from maternity leave, what is he talking about? Racist overpass that were built too low for trucks. First of all, who the hell has ever seen something like that? I mean, I've been a city dweller my whole life. I never ran into a truck that got into an accident because an overpass was too low. I've never seen it. Somebody has seen an instance of that, please tell me. But that's just crazy. It's just crazy. It just shows you the priority, George.
No, you're absolutely right. No, the perception is really the key part of inflation. I mean, why inflation tends to be so devastating is that people are making a calculation that prices are going to keep rising. So if prices are going to keep rising, then it's in my interest to buy as much up as possible now, because in a few months' time, I won't be able to afford it. And so that, of course, feeds into ever greater inflation, because then there's not enough goods, and therefore there's too much money circulating after insufficient goods. So that's why inflation tends to be so devastating. It's like because people have perceptions, and therefore they have no idea really what's going on. But what's remarkable is that given the fears of inflation, given these numbers that you're presenting, the Biden administration and the Democrats are pursuing an agenda that is exactly the worst possible agenda, which will only serve to fuel inflation. Let's pour in 2, 3, 4, $5 trillion into the economy. That is just absolutely insane. I mean, because that's guaranteed to make inflation worse. So, I mean, everybody has always known. I mean, the only time that it makes any sense to stimulate an economy, to pour money into an economy, is when there's a recession. When there isn't a recession, as there is, there's an economic recovery and there's already an inflationary spiral, then this is just absolutely devastating. And this is just going to get worse because now people are already receiving this $3-4 trillion that are being poured into the economy.
And yeah, Richard, it's very important to point out here, George is absolutely right. But a lot of people out inside of the United States do not understand that when the U.S. does this, U.S. exports very little these days. But one of the things it does export and is very good at is inflation. It inflates the rest of the global economy. And so you have a lot of struggling economies, particularly Europe, that is, forever stagnant these days. It's just adding more misery. And so inflation is passed on around the world. And then you get this compound effect here. I mean, so this has profound implications for the
No, I think that's right. And that's why if one goes back to the 1960s, during the LBJ, the sort of LBJ's guns and butter policy, which is, we can finance a war in Vietnam, a space program, plus a big domestic program. Well, of course, it fueled inflation, but that spread to Europe. And then the Europeans responded, particularly de Gaulle, is saying, hey, we're not going to hold dollars anymore. And they started converting their dollars into gold. And of course, that triggered the American exit from the gold, because they simply couldn't go on just, basically having, people dumping dollars for gold. And Nixon responded by taking the dollar off the gold standard. But that's the point, that once you start exporting inflation, then other countries have to make appropriate adjustments, as the Europeans did in the late 60s.
And what this is doing, just to finish off on this point here, is that you have had over the last few years, particularly the last, I would say 5 years, George, you can correct me if you want, but this whole de-dollarization process. Russia's getting out of it, India's getting out of it. The Chinese, of course, they're using American debt very smartly, by the way. They're using their American debt, worthless debt, and they're buying assets all around the world. So they're turning these T-bills and into real assets, okay? It's brilliant what they're doing. They know they can't short it. They can't cash in on it. It's too much. Okay, so what they're doing is they're using it, transferring it into assets. Okay, and so, but this whole global trend. See, if the U.S. slows down, then the rest of the world is a beta effect, and it impacts it as well. So the Biden administration isn't doing anybody any favors, because technically speaking, the world economy should be roaring. I mean, roaring.
This is the thing. This is what, I try to keep my cool during these shows when we get reports like this, because if one thing sets me off, it's unnecessary economic pain, because these people lie to the public. And by these people, I mean politicians, the media. They lie to them and do not give them all of the information that is necessary for them to make an informed decision about whatever government they want to move forward with. And that's why we always do these visualizations. It's really not debatable once you look at it on visually. And as far as deception goes, I'm going to put up the PPI, which I wasn't going to go over, but the shaded areas on the graph that I just showed everybody indicate a recession. Okay. And when Trump was still in office at the final close, right before the election, and we went into that summer, there was debate, and you could see it because when it's your job, like it is mine, to follow this stuff, you could see that some of them decided to make the decision to end those shaded areas, which is the recession ban. Even before there was like an official declaration, people understood that this recession largely was a self-induced recession from the shutdown. And in April, by the time April came back, the economic indicators all came in strong, with the exception of some employment indicators. things were pretty much on par, if not in housing, for instance, surpassing where we were. Yet the St. Louis Fed decided to reverse course. Here is the PPI. You can see where they have that last recession area. And I'm telling you guys, the depth of deception, people only know like the tip of the iceberg. This was continued until recently. And when Joe Biden took office and was inaugurated, they adjusted the recession band. Everybody knew that damn recession was over. We didn't need the council or the bureau, excuse me, to declare that it was over. That band was moved in I think it was July before the election. And then I guess what? We get in the silly season. They don't want little things like this. They don't want people to know the recession's over. It's over. It was self-induced. And if we go back to strict mitigation efforts, we're going to re-plunge ourselves into economic darkness. So we watch little things that happen like this, and it kind of reminds me of the shifting of somebody's polling averages, the way that the averages always favor a certain party or candidate until maybe 24 hours before the vote. And then all of a sudden they're adjusted, all funny business. They're adjusted and a poll is dropped out of that average. So it changes it to reflect reality, right? But that was always the reality. And the St. Louis Fed did this. They had this recession over in the summer, and then they knew it was going to, oh my God, this race is tightening. Let's expand the bands again. I don't know. I don't know what's in their mind, but we watched them do it. And now here we are, and you can see the PPI right here, just like every other indicator. If you go back, they'll show you that recession basically ended in April. That was the end of that. It was self-imposed, but that is not the way those were. And for the longest time, we at PPD were the only ones who had those bands in April, ending, and we took flack for it.
Yeah.
And people even said the St. Louis Fed has the recession still ongoing. Who the hell are you to declare an end to the recession? The Fed. Well, let me tell you what the Fed said last week, that we can't get control of inflation until at least the second half of 2022. So here we are. And that is a pushback. Do you think that's even reasonable, guys? I'll start with you, Peter. I'll throw it to you. Or I'll go to, maybe I should go to George.
Okay, I'll say it really short. Go ahead. What we're experiencing right now is a choice. They're choosing to do this. This is an economic choice on their part. Okay, and we don't have devastating political implications. I mean, we can talk all night until we're blue in the face about CTR and all that. Most people don't care about it. There's a small minority that cares a lot about that, and that's good. I'm okay with that. But inflation, the price of milk, the price of gasoline, that's a unifying thing. That's bipartisan. Okay, and if you want to trivialize it, it's a choice. Go ahead. I'm sorry, George. Go ahead.
No, I don't think that inflation is going to be squeezed out of the economy 2022, because I think that they've now passed this infrastructure bill. I think they're going to pass something. I think that they are going to pass some version of this Build Back Better bill. And it's essentially, they are pouring in an enormous amount of money into an economy that is already overheating. I think this is going to be, inflation is just going to get worse. So I think these are all, absurd and completely unrealistic numbers, just as the claims that this, what do they call it? Not the supply side shortage. What's the lack of the supplies, which they're now called
the supply chain.
The supply chain, exactly. The supply chain crisis. Just as they're claiming, that's going to come to an end very shortly as well. I don't think that's going to happen either. So no, I think that things are going to get better. Well, let me just turn it back to you, Richard. Do you agree with me that they're going to pass some version of a Build Back Better bill?
Yeah, and I say sadly because when you poll it, you use the stupid term Build Back Better, and people are like, yeah, that sounds good. Okay, even though now it's actually about half and half. But when you drill down into the provisions specifically, and you're not ridiculously generic like some of these media polls that should be ashamed of themselves are, and you explain to them what it actually is, it's not supported. And when you ask them, like the Suffolk University poll that was out on Monday, if you ask them, Will this make your life better or worse? More people will say it will make my life worse. So big spending right now, I think, is back on the table as far as an issue because of inflation. And yet Republicans, these corny, they're not even corny. They're crooked. They're crooked. Can we be honest? Adam Kinzinger is a crook. Liz Cheney is a crook.
You said because of inflation. Well, then that's a circular thing. I mean,
that's what I'm saying. Voters are like, what in the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
We're worried about inflation. What are you spending all of this money for? They're not as stupid, I think, Peter, as politicians want them to be or hope or think they are. And when we talk to people, that cost of living issue is like skyrocketing to the front of the pack. I hope we get back in the field nationally this weekend. The public polling project's about half of the way there. I think we'll probably make it. We tend to see late surges. Like when I say, hey, let's get back in the field, we see late surges of support. I hope we do. Because I want to know nationally, is it happening like I see what is happening in the States? And I think, as to George's point, they are, I think, going to push this anyway, even though, that it's not popular. I have never seen the cheerleading of an agenda that's so unpopular for a man who's so unpopular, whose number two is so unpopular. I mean, it's
the trick
incredible.
is here. The trick is reconciliation, and that's how they're going to do it.
Yep.
Because basically, it's not everyone that's going to vote on this. It's going to be representatives of both sides, and they're going to go through each single one. So a lot of people can walk away and say, well, I didn't vote for it. I mean, it was,
that's
the
right.
caucus did this.
Play the game.
It's stealth. It's really stealth. And that's why these traitorous Republicans are going to be able to say, oh, I had nothing to do with that. And technically they're going to be able to say it. Okay. Because everyone focuses on Sinema and Manchin. But, they're a cover for cowards. They're a covered for
That's
cowards.
exactly right, Peter. I'm so glad you said that. And speaking, the ultimate coward move is to be like Adam Kinzinger and stab his voters in the back and then run like a little from them because he knows he's going to get trounced.
It begins with a B, everybody. It begins with a B.
It does. It begins with a B. And this is supposed to be some kind of military, hero. This is the most cowardly kind of politician that is out there. It doesn't get any worse than this. He is half bought and half coward. And this is exactly what is wrong with our government. These people will, and this is why nothing ever changes. He is that exact.
But that's what's so interesting about this. Now, here are these Republican leaders who allow.
Yeah, that's what I want to get into. Go ahead. Yeah.
13 members of their caucus to vote against their wishes. Now, can you imagine Pelosi permitting 13 members of her caucus to vote against her? They wouldn't do it. I mean, they wouldn't dare to defy her like that. But the Republicans, they always say, well, there's nothing much that we can do. I mean, some of them are retiring anyway, and they're going to go be lobbyists and whatever. Well, if that's the case, then strip them of their committee assignments. Take the whip away from them. I mean, if that's the case, if it's true that there's nothing you can do with them, and they're not going to listen to you, then fine. Then you say, okay, we're withdrawing the whip. You can do what you like. And we're taking away your committee assignment. But you can't just simply say, oh, well, nothing we can do, but you can still hold on to your prestigious.
Yeah, but George, isn't it telling you everything you need to know about Kevin McCarthy? Do you need to know more?
Yep. And just to add to that, what I'm showing on the screen right now, because, I was going to bring it up, but George, you nailed it. And then Peter jumped. You guys do this all the time. You jumped right off of George with what I was going to say, which is, this is why we see the numbers the way we do when we poll the favorability ratings of these people. The difference between Pelosi and Schumer is that they represent their voters, and they'll be damned if a member gets out of line, and they'll do what they got to do to put him back in. It's astonishing how the trend, and I'm going to go through like 4 or 5 real quick, but even if you can't see it, you'll be able to see the general size of each block. It starts, Chuck Schumer's at the top, Mitch McConnell is second, that's the Senate. Nancy Pelosi and Kevin McCarthy for the House are third and fourth as far as rows go. And you'll notice that they change month to month very little. How much very favorable, very unfavorable. The reason why Nancy Pelosi, who has typically has the highest very unfavorable rating, that's we started with about 43%. If we continue and go, let's go all the way to Labor Day here. Let me skip forward. and go to Labor Day. And you'll see basically, no, something click, but you'll see what it's 44.3. I mean, so the point is it barely changes around that 44 mark. The reason why she's not as net unfavorable as Republican leaders both is because Democrats circle the wagons around her. Independents and Republicans can't stand her. And Chuck Schumer has done a pretty good job, even though he's getting more unfavorable now. He's done a pretty good job of kind of staying, halfway neutral, right? But the more people learn about Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer, the more negative they have gotten. And Mitch McConnell has the largest overall unfavorable rating out of anybody. It's just that his very unfavorable is slightly lower. And the reason why it's because Republicans don't like him. If you look by party, Republicans don't like Kevin McCarthy. They don't like, Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell's very favorable rating among Republicans has been single digits since we started polling, when Joe Biden took office. I mean, this is, this trend line for this project. And Kevin McCarthy is the only thing he has going for him is that about 30% still say they don't really know him. But unfortunately, the more people have, that's it. That's not a good thing to have. But he's still net extremely negative. I mean,
but that's the thing, because what we have with these Republican leaders is that they want power. They want, hey, give me the majority leader position. Hey, I want to be Speaker of the House. But then the Republican voters know they're not actually going to do anything with that power. Yeah. I mean, what did the guy, who was that speaker? The one before
Boehner?
Boehner, exactly. But Boehner, I mean, what did Boehner do? I mean, he became Speaker after 2010. What exactly did he do? What did he do?
He trusted Obama. That was his mistake.
He drank port with Obama. That's what he did. That's what he did.
Yeah. And that's the thing, every Republican voters know, okay, they can vote for the Republicans next year, and McCarthy will be Speaker. What's McCarthy going to do with that job? I mean, now you've got this big job. What are you actually going to do with it? Well, the truth is, you're not going to do anything with it.
But the difference is, and this, I think this is very interesting. A lot of Democrats know what they're voting for. Okay, they know what Republicans don't, because the Republican leadership is very, very deceptive. They'll talk about Dr. Seuss, and they'll talk about CPR, but when they have power, they just have one thing in front of them: the Rolodex of their donors. That's all. They don't care about anything else. They seriously don't do it, okay? And what they're doing is, I mean, the Democrats love to be careerists, okay? But Republicans looking for another, it's part of their resume. They want to get on these boards, be lobbyists, I mean, I've had so many former Congress people on Crosstalk that are lobbyists right now. It's extra, and most of them Republicans. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that it's very deceptive, because the Republicans like to come out very ideological, but they're really not. Okay. And the Democrats, that's what makes them really scary, because they really are ideologues. Okay. That's why they got their butts kicked and 2 weeks ago, because they're ideologically obsessed. I mean, for them, there's something wrong with the voters. I mean, how could they possibly do this? I've never seen this in my whole life. I've never seen how MSNBC, CNN, all they do, they turn around and they just excoriate all of the electorate. How could you possibly do this? I've never seen anything like it.
Right, but that's the thing with the Democrats, because we've talked about this, I think, last time, that they came in, they had no mandate, they lost seats in the House, 50-50 split in the Senate. And what do? They push ahead with a massive agenda. And then if you say to them, hey, you can't do that. Well, what do you mean we can't do that? Yeah, we're doing it. And that's what they did. Can you imagine the Republicans? I mean, if the Republicans had a tiny sliver of a majority, they would say, oh, please, Nancy, tell us what to do. What should we do now?
George, they had total control of the government after the election in 2016. It wasn't a huge majority in the House, but it was enough to get things done. They failed on Obamacare. They failed on real, border security. Donald Trump had to do that, with everyone kicking and screaming. They failed on everything that was central. They did nothing about censorship. They failed on everything that was central, and they fought Trump on the America First agenda every step of the way. Media and, assumed the role essentially of the opposition party and they worked with, really bad people like Adam Schiff. I mean, this guy, I don't know if you saw The View earlier,
yeah.
but The View gave it to him. Good, finally. But that's like, what,
Finally.
4 years too late? It's 4 years too late.
Yeah.
We now know this is a Russia hoaxer. They used because they lost them. This is the problem I'm really worried about, guys. And this is like, getting a little bit deeper here off the topic. But what I worry about for this country, for the future of this country, is that here we have one party who won full control of the government, and a corrupt media worked with a corrupt intelligence community and a very corrupt remnant of a minority party, and essentially hindered government from implement. They did have a mandate, guys. They actually had a mandate, an electoral mandate. I mean, Trump won in what is an electoral vote landslide for a Republican.
Right.
Republicans had pretty good, solid seat majority in the Senate, and they, were not a huge majority in the House, not like an Obama government circa 2009, but enough to to have a mandate. And I worry that one side is going to conclude that none of this works for them anymore, because everything is so corrupt and against them. And you have a tiny 50-50 split in the Senate, where Kamala Harris and her 28% approval rating is the tie-breaking vote. I mean, this is crazy. And then a very slim majority in the House. We all know they're going to lose. And they are running roughshod, like they have a bigger majority than 2009 trying to pass Obamacare. And I worry that half the damn country is just going to say, you know what? We need another way, which is what could eventually segue me into these crowds we're seeing for these mandates. But you guys ever seriously consider that scenario?
You're absolutely right, because I think what happened in 2016 and throughout the Trump years was a very, very sinister plot inside the government, in collusion with Democrats who were lying. They knew they were lying. But they used their powers to cook up a ridiculous hoax, but which, almost brought down Trump. I mean, he could have done. I mean, if Mueller could have pushed it further, Mueller could have easily just said, hey, I recommend impeachment. I mean, it's he after all came quite close to it in that ridiculous report of his. Well, he was lying, or and so on. So it was a very sinister plot, and you can bet that they're going to do this again. I mean, they're not just Democrats are going to say, okay, well, we lost in 2024 to Trump, and that's it. We'll be good losers. We're not good losers, and they will try something of this again in 2024.
Yeah, I'm trying to actually pull it up, but we polled the likelihood. And this is something my locals community asked me to do. And they said, can we add a question about the likelihood of a second civil war? Because at this point, a lot of people fear that. I can't believe. And while I let you talk, Peter, I'll throw it up and I'll show people what we found. But it was very disturbing to me.
Well,
and then go ahead.
What we had, let's remind ourselves of history. What we had before the Civil War was secession. Now, I'm more worried or thinking about, because I think secession is already happening. I mean, nobody wants to say it out loud.
You can make that argument.
And I think it's in a direction it's almost irreversible because of the corruption of the Republican Party. They won't be a break on this. Okay. I mean, the Democrats, they want to completely remake the country in their own image, okay? And come hell or high water, they're going to continue. I use my favorite phrase: they're ideologically possessed. They're not going to be able to retreat. The Republicans, on the other hand, can run on winning issues. I mean, Youngkin, you're more of an expert on this than I am, but I mean, he ran a pretty good campaign. I was very impressed. He knew how to connect with people. And unlike the Democrats that were completely out to lunch, I mean, it was extraordinary to watch it, particularly the last week or so when these guys are just going to dig in. I mean, they're quadrupling down. Okay. So I think there's already a secession of the mind. People are already in that area right now. As far as civil war, I think that's, I don't want to think that's on the cards, but we're seeing a major separation going right now, and both sides want it, okay? Because the Democrats don't want to be with the rubes, and the Republicans, they're saying this is not our country. You're taking our country away from us, okay? It's not the Republicans that are or conservatives that are ideologically possessed. I wish they were actually more.
I think that's it. But the Civil War is a kind of an interesting aspect to it because, you know, the hysteria of the Democrats and the political elites towards the events of January the 6th is not wholly misplaced. I mean, they kind of know what was going on in the minds of the people who showed up in Washington on January the 6th. They felt this election was stolen from them. They felt that, you know, and they had no means of redress. All the various attitudes that the Trump and the people who worked for Trump tried, whether it was in the state legislatures, in the courts, in the Supreme Court, all of these avenues were blocked after them. And they felt frustrated. I mean, like, well, what do you do now? You know,
and that's why
that's
why there was secession. That was why there was secession when Lincoln was elected. People thought the South no longer thought they had recourse.
And let me read exactly how, because this is, you guys using a lot of very similar words. So the question was worded, and then you'll see, because there was really a 3-part section on the questionnaire. It was, how likely do you think it is? And then whether or not people thought there was a political peaceful solution, and or whether you wanted one. And it really is scary. What's more scary than this many people thinking that eventually there will be, is how many people don't want a peaceful solution. So on both sides, there's a group of people who are just like, let's bang out and see who wins. And I can't believe that number is this high. I mean, I was stunned when we came out with this poll. I was stunned when I was processing. Like, this really can't be.
The numbers? Can you read some of the numbers?
So, and let me read the question specifically. How likely is it the United States of America is headed for another civil war or widespread political violence that leads to significant division? And very likely was 22%, which, if you look, Democrats were basically just under the national average of very likely. Republicans were just over it. Independents just under it. I mean, everybody else, it's incredible that there are so many people. And if I do it by, well, I'll leave it like this. It's incredible that everybody was in agreement, guys. This doesn't happen often. And then somewhat likely was 37.9. So overall, about 6 in 10 voters think it's likely. And again, Democrats just a hair under the national average. Republicans just a hair over the national average. Independents were almost identical to Republicans on this. And third-party voters were actually a little bit more than Republicans and independents, which was, again, incredible. What is so interesting is the agreement by party. And I was stunned by that because I just don't see that often on many things, guys. I just don't. It doesn't, you know, and then can you resolve it without upheaval, violent upheaval, or that leads to significant division? And 39%, well, 39, well, let's call it 40, round up. 4 in 10 thought it was possible to resolve peacefully, while a slight, almost majority thinks that it's not possible. Again, this starts to be, this is where it starts to diverge a little bit by party, but not a whole hell of a lot, you know, which is crazy. And then support for a peaceful resolution of the union is +9 oppose. So people would rather continue on this trajectory than peacefully break it up now, which was astonishing to me. So if that many people, if there's widespread agreement that we're going to lead, that this is going to lead to bloodshed, that this is not resolvable, like there's no way to close the gap between us anymore. If there are that many people who believe that, gentlemen, then how is it that only 30% support a peaceful, preemptive secession, like Peter's talking about, separation? So what if you think we're going to fight, why don't we find a peaceful resolution to this now and separate? I'm just stunned because there's a group, it's big, that would rather fight. I just can't. I mean, I just stunning. I don't think the media and politicians are thinking through what they're doing here, or maybe they are. I don't know. I'm a cynic.
Oh, I think unfortunately a lot of people. I think we're really at a drift right now because I think because of lack of real leadership. I mean, these most people that are in power are so utterly incompetent. I don't care what party they're just completely incompetent as a class of people. But what's really quite frightening for me is that I see a lot more conservatives now and independents saying, you can't deal with these people. We've
Yeah.
tried. We've
Yeah.
tried to talk to these people in a civilized manner, trying to find appeal to our better angels, trying to have mutual respect, but it doesn't come the other way. And I think a lot of people are just saying you can't negotiate anymore because it's as Kennedy said when dealing with Khrushchev. Khrushchev's position is what is mine, and what is yours is negotiable. And I think a lot of people saying they've given up. They've simply given up. That you can't deal with these people. That's why I think you have these kind of numbers.
Yeah,
And I gotta, somebody made a good comment. I just want to drop in before George. Ask yourselves how that poll would have been answered in 1960. And I thought about this. I did. But you would not have gotten widespread bipartisan agreement in the 1960s. And the people who were causing the biggest problems, the so-called revolutionaries, the right or the moral majority, who ended up being Nixon's majority, they just believe that's why Nixon won, because they believed they were and he won by such a big win. They believed that those people were a fraction of the country. You go back and look at Gallup's polling on some of them, even Martin Luther King. He was deeply unpopular. I mean, we lionize him now, but the country couldn't stand Martin Luther King.
Right.
They couldn't stand him. He wasn't popular until 30 years after his death. I mean, 20 years, let's say 20. I mean, that's the truth of it. Malcolm X, hated. I mean, so the people who were causing the problems, the left-wing radical, the revolutionaries, they were, and Martin Luther King does not belong in that category, but I mean, like, the people who we are talking about today that are relevant today, they were truly marginal. Would you agree with that, guys? I mean,
but that's the thing. I mean, that it was a very different time, because if you remember, it kind of started in 1960. What you said, the enemy within was the far right. I mean, it was the John Birch Society. I didn't quite call them the white supremacists in those days, the sort of the segregationists. And if you remember, the 1964 election was actually a very bitter election. There was a lot of hostility toward that the southern states that voted for Barry Goldwater, and so that and then therefore, you remember, following the Kennedy assassination, people believed at the time, for some time afterwards, that the assassin was a member of the far right. There was some far right character who had done it. That was a theory that went on for quite a while, until we learned more about Lee Harvey Oswald and his time in the Soviet Union, his communist connection. But the initial response was that it was the far right. What Nixon did is that he kind of incorporated these people as part of his new majority, and was then able to be the kind of the bearer of a kind of a new consensus, of a new majority, and managed to marginalize the left in a way that just a few years earlier the right had been marginalized. But there was at least a kind of a consensus. You could have the McGovern on the left, Goldwater on the right, but you still have a sort of an acceptable middle, represented by, I don't know, Nixon or Ford or Carter. It's very hard now to see how these two sides really get together.
I mean, but George,
that's my point. George nailed it. Yeah,
you're trying to tame the different extremes, but now the extreme is in the middle. That's our problem here. That's the problem. We have a radical center. That's the problem. And so what we have in the Republicans, what they want to do is, I get tired how they like the culture wars because it gets the base riled up. But my problem with the cultural wars is it doesn't transform the economy for working people. I mean, you could, a statue goes down, it doesn't change anything. Okay, it just gets people angry. It doesn't materially change anything, and that's why I fault the Republicans for not having more of an agenda. The Democrats, they got an agenda.
No, to be fair, I mean, Trump did have an agenda. Now, Trump came with an agenda, which was bring the industry back home, end the whole dependence on China, end immigration.
And look what they did to him, George. I'm completely agreeing with you.
Absolutely. And that's really the question. That agenda, which, look, Trump is not a socialist. I mean, he never pretended to be a socialist. He's not, he's not going to bring in, state, redistribution of wealth. I mean, that's just not who he is. But at least he had an agenda to how to bring prosperity to America, which was basically end, the offshoring and deindustrialization and so on. And he was sabotage, particularly
by Republicans.
By Republicans. Yeah. But it was an agenda. I mean, it was something that, that's something that's a distinctive program from whatever had come before. I mean, it was different from what the Democrats had been promising before, different from Republicans had been promising before.
And that's why you still have the establishment that will, you and I, George, have talked about this so many times. And we can throw in Europe, where you are, is that, never allow a populist alternative to become viable.
That's right. That's right. That's what that is the, I guess if there is an invisible, I wouldn't even call it a center, but a uniparty, an invisible uniparty, that is their if they have a common goal, that's it. So, and that is true of the United States. That's true of many European countries. They simply can't have that. And I think what you both were saying, that is why he was successful. And that was a decision that Republicans had to make. I mean, electorally, that's the decisions Republicans have to make moving forward is, can you just keep paying lip service to culture wars? Can you just keep talking about being the party of working Americans? Can you do that? Now that Trump is gone, Trump is the one who had the agenda. If you don't believe it, you can't sell it. And if they're going to try to keep the Trump coalition without a conviction in what he stood for, they're going to see right through that. Voters will see right through it. And that is, I honestly think that was the brilliance of Youngkin. He didn't want to alienate anybody, but he also did. I do not agree with the assessment. He ran away from Donald Trump. He embraced a lot of his policies. Yeah, he did. He just said, look, I know I'm in Virginia and I have to win those independents that, Peter, you and I talked about on your show, which you should plug, by the way, at the end of this, because that was fantastic. I had a blast. That was fantastic.
That was great.
But I told that Democratic strategist, you're going to lose because you lost a voting group who voted almost 20 points for Joe Biden. They're going to go 10 points or more for Glenn Youngkin. That's why you're going to lose on Tuesday. And she didn't want to hear it, but that was the genius Youngkin did. He said, look, I hear you on CRT. I hear you on transgender, gender neutral bathrooms and all of that. I do. But I also hear the other people who are concerned about cost of living and inflation. And by the way, I got a plan for that. I'm going to end your grocery tax. He spoke directly. Of course, the grocery tax matters to working families. That is directly they will see that on day one. That will matter to them immediately. That will impact them immediately. It was brilliant. And and at the same time, he forced Terry McAuliffe to say, well, no, I don't think we need to get rid of that grocery tax. Okay, Terry, yeah. So that's why that the first reason is why you lost evangelicals 80-20. And the grocery tax is why you lost working class by even larger margins than Joe Biden did.
Right.
By the way,
you probably saw that article in the New York Times a few days ago, which said that Republicans are starting to get a kind of a core base support similar to what the Democrats have with the African American vote, which is like 90% goes to them, which is rural white voters. 90% just simply will vote for the Republicans. It's like a kind of a solid base of support. And and I think some of the more intelligent Democrats are kind of realizing they've just lost kind of vast swathes of the country. I think white working class vote, they've just lost it. which used to be
George,
vote.
Chuck Schumer was wrong, George. When Chuck Schumer said, I don't care about people in Western Pennsylvania because for every working class voter in Western Pennsylvania we lose, we pick up 3 more in the Southeast. First of all, that is simply mathematical malpractice. All right. That place is losing population, and they're just that's why when we saw the registration numbers changed the way we did, Pennsylvania shifted dramatically in favor of Republicans. There is no predictive indicator that would have supported Joe Biden carrying that state. By the way, I'm not going to get into it. I'm just simply saying it doesn't make sense. A place that is economically depressed and has declining population, was in the top 10 for the census this year for loss of population. It doesn't make sense that we have these vast high turnout numbers in those areas. That is not the pattern for elections. I'm just leaving that at that. But I think people should understand, that black voters are, it depends. In Virginia, roughly 20, even though they fell below that. But nationally, gentlemen, black voters, let's call it 13.5%. White voters, let's put somewhere in the neighborhood of 67 to 73, depending on turnout. Is it a bad thing? Which is what I always want to talk to all voters. Hispanic, which by the way swung significantly again to Republicans. Black voters, Hispanic voters, Asian voters. I talk to everybody who wants, who wants their life to improve. That has always been my philosophy. But at the same time, it's important to recognize what Trump, the value he has and keeping his positions have for the Republican Party. It is still not a bad thing to be the party of the majority, race. And as far as I'm talking about mathematically speaking, and Hispanics, the working class Hispanic share of the electorate is going to rise. So if you swing that working class share your way, cobble it together with Glenn Youngkin won about 13 to 15% of the black vote. That's a winning coalition nationally. Democrats can't mess with a coalition like that. They will lose every time.
Yes, but Republicans have this amazing ability to what's the phrase? To
snatch defeat from the hand of victory.
Yeah, snatch a victory from the jaws.
So true.
My point is here, which I think, going back to something I said earlier, the message. I mean, and what happened in Virginia was a national election, and they nationalized it.
Yep.
Youngkin refused to do it. That was one winning point for him. But with their nationalized message, which they seem incapable of changing right now, this is almost like a law of physics for these people. It's a message that is inherently negative for so many people, because they're being lectured, they're being told, they're being talked down to, and this is turning a lot of people up. Now, the caveat here, which is very important, is that you see a path forward. You see an empty lane. Now, my problem is, will the Republican Party be able to grasp that? Okay, because it's what we're seeing is an alienation of so many voters of all races, of all races, and then and it's appealing that because of that message, it ends up being a class issue. And so, will the Republicans be able to cobble together a platform that is inclusive to those people that are so alienated? And I think that's a really big question, because you have too many libertarians around that don't want to go down that path. They're the ones who derailed Trump and his administration. They derailed him. Okay. Paul Ryan. Okay. Banish him forever. Okay. So, I mean, what I'm saying is the Republicans have an opportunity here. Will they grasp it?
I got it. I got to tell you, and I guess it's 11:53. I could start to at least segue into this. I got a couple, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different clips. They're short, but I do want to get into. But before we do, and they're on the mandates, because the polling came out on the mandates. Glenn Youngkin, very smart, 72 hours, but there were undecideds. 72 hours before the election, he tells the voters in Virginia, you know what? I'm not going to support these mandates, and I'm going to fight whatever mandates may come down the pipe. And he won in like I said, an even larger share of the working class vote than Donald Trump. And there are opportunities for Republicans to make inroads with some of these demographic groups they otherwise can't, who are most skeptical to this vaccine. And we're going to show some of the clips. I want you guys to look at the crowds when we do, because George, and I'll get you to comment on this before, but George, when we started polling mandates, we polled very general vaccine passport, and it would, maybe be support +3 roughly, which I'll show in a bit. But then when you got specific about employer mandates, about children getting vaccinated for school, about, needing a vaccine to go into a restaurant to eat, it all collapses. And I couldn't imagine how some of these other pollsters were coming out with these ridiculous 70% support, a mandate for kids and an employer mandate. And there is no way we could manipulate that data to come up with those kinds of numbers. When you give people the consequence at the core of the provision of the policy proposal, whatever it is, they have a very different reaction to it. And now I can't help looking at the results in Jersey. And, it's not just Virginia and New Jersey. There were provisions across the country that fell. I mean, vote by mail went down in flames in New York. So I can't help but to say, as always, that results matter, and sometimes you have to look at the pollster's accuracy in the election itself in order to know whether you can trust them on these issues that they poll people on later. Policy, impeachment, do you support or oppose this? I believe in George Gallup's old vision. And these people are coming out with these ridiculous numbers. If that was true, then how the hell did Glenn Youngkin take those late deciders 65-35? If that was true, how did he still take a solid chunk, far more than Trump, of people who said coronavirus was their number one issue? It just doesn't make sense. They don't have the numbers to come up with these like 70% figures, and the results don't bore it out. I'll throw that to you, George. What are you making?
Yeah, no, I
mean, you think they're just full of crap, George?
I think so. I've been very baffled about this myself. Because you watch these clips, these angry protests throughout Europe. People are angry. Police come there with their batons and so on. And then when you read the news reports, the journalists always say, yes, but on the whole, the mandates, the vaccine mandates are very popular. And so, yes, although there was this huge turnout, nonetheless, the majority is with the pro-vaccine crowd. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's like,
nope.
Because you talk to people, and people do not want this, and particularly they are very worried about vaccinates for their children.
Yep.
And and when it comes to masking, because ultimately they have their children have to be masked up 8 hours a day, and they're worried. They're worried about the physical and mental development of their children. I mean, they're not breathing oxygen for 8 hours a day. And so, hey, it's your
we
job.
Are.
And this
we are.
Yeah. And what is the effect of this? No one's ever known about this. What's the effect of shoving a mask on a child's face for 8 hours a day so that he can't breathe proper oxygen? He can't take proper exercise. I mean, you have to say people are very worried. And your example of what happened in Virginia, and I have to say about New Jersey, because we haven't talked about that, and
bigger story than Virginia.
I don't know what you think, Richard, but I am quite sure there was some kind of a shenanigans that were going on there, both for in the governorship race, and then in this the truck driver who had his victory stolen from him. I mean, something very badly went wrong. It is New Jersey, after all.
I was just, I'll definitely speak to that real quick. I mean, the bottom line is New Jersey, and I love everybody who's listening, who's from New Jersey. I lived there many, many years. I do still have strong affinity to the state, but if you're from there, you know it, and I know it. It is the most corrupt state in the union. Unless the District of Columbia becomes a state, New Jersey is the most corrupt, and I mean it even surpasses New York. All right. So there is Bergen County. It's like, does anybody have any real evidence? I mean, nobody's got any real evidence, but I remember my very first, and by the way, Edward Durr he'll hold on in 3. He will. They tried, but what I'll get specific about when Sweeney said they found 12,000 votes, that race was called in Senate District 3. They probably could have taken that away from Edward Durr if the Democratic Party in New Jersey didn't already move on and leave Sweeney as a dead roadkill, like, persona non grata. if you lose to a guy who spent $200, most of it on donuts for poll workers, right? Then they're not going to respect you anymore. And the truth is, this is part of what we were talking about with that working class. There's these ancestral working class Hispanics, Italians, Irish, in places like Sweeney's district, where you have Gloucester County, still the most area in his district, part of it that cuts into it. You have Salem, you have Cumberland, all moving more so to the right. But these ancestral Democratic voters that know they're not really Democrats anymore, but their grandparents voted for Democrats, they voted for Democrats. That district went for Obama overwhelmingly. All right. But this time around in 2016, Trump carried it by 3 points, 3.5 against Hillary Clinton, which was a shocker. But Sweeney was still able to hold on because of that connection that Republicans still, like what we were talking about. Yeah, relationships. And Republicans don't know how to beat that down because they're too busy, like George said, being led by people who just pick up the phone for K Street. They talk the working class and family message, but they don't actually do it until somebody like Trump, and then people who are trying to carry the banner for Trump going forward, they'll do it. Like Edward Durr. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, he had some pretty good ads. He knocked on doors. He did what he did. And even the gubernatorial candidate, Chattarelli, he should have, if the establishment, I don't mean to offend anybody, but it is what it is. If the establishment simpletons at the Republican Governors Association would take the, and that's not even wax, it's money. Take the money they got stuffed in their ears, maybe they would have been able to hear the voice. When you see an electorate swing like this, you can win races like that. This man was going from diner to diner to diner up and down Route 9. That's how you win New Jersey as a Republican. It's been done before. It's not impossible. And Bergen County, of course, I wasn't there. I don't have any specific evidence, but I know Bergen and I know it well. It's in my mind, without seeing anything, it's like 90-10 they took Bergen from Chattarelli. I mean, if you are arguing that's not the case, you are an idiot who knows nothing about New Jersey politics. I watched, and I tell people this example all the time because it was my very first introduction to it. And I was watching these terrible operations to exploit, the Black community in ghettos of like Asbury Park and Ocean Grove. And this is New Jersey. It's a machine. It still is a very ugly remnant of like the Tammany Hall era. And it's got to go. I mean, it serves no one. Chris Christie was so good, at what he did because he knew it was a machine. And especially he beat Corzine by a few points. And then when he got in, he made friends in all the right places and he made threats to all the right people. And that is sadly how you have to win secure your own reelection in the state of New Jersey. They come up with Bridgegate because they needed something to get rid of him. He was just too good. I mean, that's the truth. And had they not come up with Bridgegate, who knows whether we would have had Donald Trump in that lane as opposed to Chris Christie, because Bridgegate hurt him bad. And it really cut his chances as a leading presidential candidate in the Republican field in 2016. But yeah, I got it. I think New Jersey overall, though, is still a bigger story because take Sweeney. Gloucester County was like one of those last counties that would not go Republican in his district for him. And it swung 21 points. 21 points. And by the way, demographically, that should have been the case. It should have been voting like that for a while. So Republicans hit a nerve this time. Let's see if they can hold on to it, guys. Let's see if they can hold on to it. But the vaccination, what did Edward Durr talk about all the time? Mandates. I mean, his business was businesses were being crushed. He said, they continue to do this to us and then leave those, their policies are so draconian, cost of living so ridiculous. They're causing everybody to run away to Florida and Texas and other places, leaving those of us he said something very powerful, leaving those of us, who are left behind to carry a greater and greater share of the burden. And that is New Jersey, native New Jersey, 100%. Yeah, but if somebody can encapsulate it in a sentence, that was
what I think is really interesting, and this goes all across the Western world, is that, and George and I have talked about this many, many times and privately as well, is that, you know, I am vaccinated. Okay. I had the two Sputnik jabs, and now I'm going to not name names, my kind of close circle around me here living in Moscow. And, you know, what about the booster shot? And I told this to George privately earlier. I said, I'm done. I've done everything they asked me to do. I wore the gloves for months. Still wear a mask. The jabs. Okay. I've said this to people before. I don't believe in masks. I think they're ridiculous. They don't work. But why do I wear it? I wear it because I'm informing people. I understand there is a health emergency, and I'm consciously aware of it, and I'm going to be responsible for my behavior. That's the only reason why I wear it. Okay. And you really don't get in trouble here if you don't wear it. Okay. But, you know, I think, you know, when I looked at a lot of these interviews, and I'm glad we went to New Jersey, because you're looking at a lot of these, what I guess people still or might call soccer moms or whatever. And that was the same thing. They said, look, we did everything you said. And the schools are still closed. And it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And then no mask, then vaccine or mask, and then vax and mask. And I think a lot of people are just falling away from the reservation and saying, you people in power are nuts, okay? Because all we see is these images of you having a good time without a mask, and you say we should wear a mask, and you're hurting our children. Don't go there. You and I talked about this on Crosstalk. Don't mess with suburban women.
Don't mess with the kids.
Don't.
That's right. And you know what? Let's bring, that's a good place to 12:05. Let's bring up just real quick the results, what I was talking about. This goes back to the late summer survey we did when everyone was coming out with these 70% plus passport support numbers. We found strongly support was 27.2, somewhat support 21.3, so 48.5 rounded up to 49, who said, yeah, I guess, because people want to be reasonable, right? And if you look at strongly opposed, which may be cut off here, that was 34.7. So the opposition has all the intensity. And then another 11.4% who said they somewhat oppose. So even we found support plus around 3 points. But when you start to get into the specifics, guys, here's the employer vaccine, allowing employers to fire employees for not taking the vaccine. Nearly 4 in 10 strongly opposed it, which was 38%. Another 16% somewhat. And then you're really starting to dip now into like 40, 30, high 30s that supported it. Moving on to kids. Watch this. This is the COVID vaccines, support or opposition for making children take the COVID vaccine before, going to school, like adding it to the list of required immunizations that we have seen in the U.S. before, like polio. What's some of the other ones? Polio, meningitis. What's some of them?
Smallpox,
whatever.
Smallpox.
Right. Yeah, that's 39% somewhat oppose that. Another 16.1% somewhat opposed it. So now we're in the mid 50s of opposition, and support, falls easily into the high 30 category. So this was a very simple case of telling people. And by the way, the restaurants also were abysmal. People did not support this at all. Look, 35.2, 14.6. It was a little bit closer than some of the other ones. But when it came to the kids, like Peter just said, don't mess with the kids. I mean, it was not close. And we were really the odd man out here because there were people who were just finding the most ridiculous numbers for support of this for support of these policies, and people were just not trying to buy it. Peter, like you, about 20% in the most recent number we had, which was only about a month ago, about 20% of people who are vaccinated with the 2-dose regimen. Only about 20% said that they're not getting the booster, and that's like final, right? And then other people are weighing it.
One of the important things.
How are they going to deal with this?
Well, I think a lot of people came to the same conclusion that I have, and I've already discussed it with George. I mean, at my age, I'm not an old man, but I'm not a young man, okay? And these injections, they're new. And I'm very pro-vaccine. I mean, I think vaccines are one of the greatest things of modern society.
Me too. Absolutely.
Truly. But I mean, I want to protect my immune system, okay? And no one has convinced me that it's a good idea to keep pumping this stuff into me. Okay, am I going to damage my immune system by doing this? I don't know. Like I said, I did everything. I was a good Boy Scout. I did everything that was asked of me, and the result is we just had another 10-day lockdown. Okay, here
That's crazy.
Why?
I mean, Peter, I think what really you just said, and I got to always tiptoe on some of these, we're everywhere. We're Rumble, we're everywhere, but, when we're still going to YouTube, so I'm going to do this a little bit. The United Kingdom, about 2 weeks ago, released a report which really came on the heels of Israel doing so too, because you really have Israel ahead of everybody with the boosters. And you said, and I'm going to just leave it at this, you said, I'm worried about compromising my immune system. And Israel first released research that lended credibility to that concern. And I'm just going to be vague here. Now the UK, with the only difference with the UK was age, like which categories seem to have that problem more than others. And but overall, the general consensus was the same, which was in the UK it was 30 and above. And with Israel, it really they didn't seem at all to stratify or even say that age was an impact. That generally speaking, when we did adverse effects, at least it's nothing to do with immunity, whether it would compromise it. We found a pattern, which was the older you are, the less likely you were to report any adverse effects. The younger you were, the more severe adverse effects you felt. And by the way, folks, the numbers are way more. National was about 4% severe adverse effects. So, and that we're only in a registered voter pool. So we're talking 18 to 100. We go up to usually 100. So I mean that's not what VAERS suggested. And when we found that, it was concerning because 4% of this many vaccinated people is a huge number, folks. We're talking about millions and millions of people. So we're not talking about a tiny fraction.
That's right. And then what's becoming very concerning is the number of athletes who are having these adverse effects as a result of taking the vaccine. I mean, so it's
that's right.
It was an article in some German newspaper today about the number of professional footballers who have now suffered serious adverse effects as a result of taking the vaccine, including this guy, Sergio Aguero, who's a big football star with Manchester City, and now I think he's with Barcelona. So it's clear that this is, the marginal benefits that you maybe have as a result, marginal relative to what you would get if you had a natural immunity. On the other hand, you have the problem, which is, this actual vaccine has adverse health effects, and particularly among young people and young, physically active,
healthy people, right? So it's against, because I got family members and they're older and they're concerned about it, and like Peter said, he got two. I mean, I think that really is your decision. If you feel COVID really does put you at risk, then if I was in, and I don't want, if I was in my old man's position, I would probably want to keep up with that. I probably would have lined up to be the first. I mean, lifetime smoker, kind of guy. I mean, I would have, I could see that. But when you're young and you're healthy, the idea, especially when they're leaky, that's the problem for me. So it's not like people keep saying, well, that's not how it works. Everyone has to be vaccinated for it to work. It's not polio. Okay, it's not that is not how it works. I mean, I don't know where they come up with this stuff. It's not measles, mumps, rubella, all these other. We're not talking about that. What you're asking people to do, especially with the children now 5 to 11 in the US, what you're asking them to do is put their perfectly healthy children, many of whom already had COVID, right? So they already had it. They kicked it. My son kicked it in like less than 48 hours. And it was incredible. My daughter was like, Dad, I got a sniffle, and my wife and I are like, oh, my head is killing me. I mean, because we're older, So, I mean, it wasn't, it felt like a flu. Yeah. What Laura hated the most is she couldn't taste. So here I am making ziti, making all this stuff. And she's like, this is what hell is for me. This is what hell is. if I have to be a good girl, because if I go to hell, this is what it will be for me. I can't taste anything. I mean, it's miserable.
The problem also is this whole mania about zero COVID. That is ridiculous.
That's crazy, Peter. It's never possible.
Every virus is how you manage it. Okay, it's how you manage it, and that should be the goal here. And unfortunately, politics invades to one degree or another, and some countries is much more politicized than others. Okay,
yes.
So I mean, when you inject politics into it, then you get into these absolutes, all right, and that is ridiculous. That is not scientific. You manage problems, okay, and until we know more about the origins of it, which I don't think we will, because there are too many vested interests that don't want to find out about the origins.
Yep.
We're going to have to manage living with it, okay, and that's that has been in time immemorial. Our viewers have to remember, 100 years ago, we had the Spanish flu. It was awful, terrible experience. But that was the norm for human existence. We had viruses all the time. We had plagues all of the time. That's why I go back to my comment that I think vaccines are one of the greatest accomplishments of modernity, okay? Because we can start managing these things and instead of letting them conquer us, wipe out huge parts of the population. Now we've learned how to manage it. We should take a step back and remember, and as both of you have already echoed here, is one size doesn't fit all. Okay, we're all different, and we should be everyone should.
But that's really the issue. Yeah, but that's really the issue here, because the COVID, the median age of death is higher than the median age of life expectancy.
Population. Right. The population at large.
That's right. The median age of death for COVID, I think, is something like 82, 83, which is above the life expectancies, certainly of American men, but I think, and I think, also even maybe American women. So to say, oh my God, he died of COVID. Yeah, but at that age, people die. Everyone dies of something. Whatever it is, you die of something. Whether it's a heart attack, or whether it's a stroke, whether it's cancer, whether it's influenza, everyone dies of something. So to say, oh my God, COVID is killing people, it's such a misleading way of putting it. And it was so obnoxious during the campaign, the 2020 campaign, when Biden said, well, Trump is responsible for the deaths of 500,000 Americans.
Crazy.
We'll still be here. They would still
outrageous.
Be here at our dinner table if it hadn't been for Trump. Well, how do you know that? You see people in the late 80s and 90s. How do you know they would still be at the dinner table?
But don't
it's like that Walgreens advertisement now for the new super flu vaccine, and it's like this guy's an older, very old African American male, and he said, "I'm not going to survive COVID just to be taken out by some flu." Like, dude. Grandpas die, you'll be taken out by something. What are you talking about? I mean, this is crazy. I mean, it's going back to this idea, we're supposed to move on with our lives when there's not a single viral particle in the environment. I mean, separating it from polio. I saw somebody's comment I just want to address real quick. Polio vaccines were not leaky. Polio it was not like a coronavirus insofar as it evolves, okay, like a flu or a coronavirus does. Newsflash, coronaviruses have been around for a very long time. This is the reason we never had a vaccine for them, and nobody even bothered to waste research on it. Only when governments dangled the dollar in front of their face did Pfizer, Moderna, and all the rest of them decide, oh, let's do it, even though they damn well knew, and listen to me carefully, they knew it would be leaky. And they knew that it actually was risk of putting variants into the population. So, read more. Read a book. I don't know what to tell you.
This is
not polio.
This is a self-induced. This is
it's a mania.
Error. It's because look, you come in. We're gonna beat COVID. Okay, that Biden. Remember, it was two things: beat COVID and $2,000. Remember, I know it's ancient history now. But it was those two things, okay? Well, the 2000 went down the drain, but that was a fundamental error. We said, we will learn how to manage to deal with this virus. That would be a factual statement, okay? To beat it, what does that mean? Okay. And if you really want to do that, then you're going to have to lock down society forever, because you're never going to get rid of it. It's going to be with us forever. It's how you manage it.
Right, right. And I think what this guy, Robert Malone, who's I mean, the guy's a real expert. And what he
He's inventor of the mRNA vaccines. Don't listen to him. What does he know?
Right. That's right. But what he says is that once you adopted this policy of vaccinating everybody, all you're doing is actually making the virus stronger, because they're learning how to beat the vaccine, and then they can mutate and become super viruses, and then you could have a real pandemic on your hands. Not like this one, but a really serious one, because they're now stronger and will be even more virulent than the current one. So it makes no sense to vaccinate everybody. It's like overuse of pesticides or overuse of antibiotics. So the pests and the bacteria learn how to beat the
host.
Kill them, exactly.
The host, because it wants to survive. I mean,
exactly.
Look,
and
he predicted this. I know he's like a band name, which is crazy, because anyone who looks at the man's history, he's been around doing this long before anybody even knew what an mRNA vaccine was. Right. I mean, it's just nuts to me. And from government to different agencies and private companies, he said exactly what was going to happen. And he wasn't alone. It's just that the media chose to mute certain people. The media chose to elevate, and I tell people this all the time, it can happen with public polling. It can happen with climate change, science, right? A fake consensus can be cobbled together very easily in the age of modern information. You just simply put forward the voices that you want to agree with that consensus. You incentivize them to echo and regurgitate that consensus, and you punish people who go against the consensus. That's why there's lopsided funding for people who are climate alarmists versus people who are climate reality-based scientists, right? And the same thing goes for public polling. And now, sadly, which is probably or perhaps the most dangerous, now it's in public health. And you have the FDA tweeting like they're what's the word? I mean, who's a good comparable? I mean, the FDA's Twitter account, if you've been watching them, sure, they'll delete it. They'll be funny and they'll get rid of it a day later, or they'll fill it with a bunch of, 10 tweets that are supposed to be factual versus one that sounds like it came from a 16-year-old girl, who's mocking somebody. And these are very partisan tweets, not even partisan, political in nature. They're not science-based. Neil deGrasse Tyson can't even define science correctly. I mean, this guy's supposed to be a genius to the point where Steakum, the Steakum sandwich company, has to explain to Neil deGrasse Tyson what is the point and definition of science. This is crazy. And it's like, if you think any consensus out there right now is legitimate, you're deeply naive.
Well,
because go ahead, Peter. Go ahead.
It's very interesting and very scary. Is that I think about 2 years ago, 20 months ago, we probably would have all agreed, without much discussion, that at least things like mathematics and physics and science, I mean, they stand on their own. Okay, well, we're all wrong if we believe that then. And because that's what I find very worrying, is that, medical professionals, what does that mean? What does that mean now? Okay, how can there be so many different points of view? And it shows that it's science has been degraded, and that is much to our detriment. And George and I have talked about this many times. It's very interesting how COVID bleeds into a climate catastrophe thinking. Okay, the science says it. The science.
Right. But that's a very good point, because the people who say science this, science that, have absolutely no idea what science is. I mean, like Nancy Pelosi. Oh, science, data. She has no idea. I mean, she doesn't know one end of a test tube from another. One end of a Bunsen burner from another. Like science. But in fact, if you listen to the real scientists, as is with Robert Malone and others, they're actually give you realistic ideas, which is they're not actually against vaccines. They are against overuse of vaccines, and they're against making it mandatory. And they certainly do not think that the immunity you get from a vaccine compares in any way to the immunity you get from actually
Naturally
being exposed to the virus. But these are views that somehow these creatures at Twitter or at Facebook or YouTube or wherever, they censor it as if they know what the hell science is. And your point about climate change is exactly right. I mean, no one denies that there has been climate change. Scientists do deny that a catastrophe is looming and that the whole world is just going to disappear within a few years. They do deny that. They do deny that it's just going to go on heating and heating and heating. And there's also a real question: how much does human activity contribute to climate change?
And George, I think
up for debate.
I think, if fair, where I am on this, and, I've watched, decades and decades of meteorological data that has been recorded. I've watched that fudged and changed over the years. We've caught authorities.
Can you spell Al Gore?
Temperature.
Al Gore, okay?
Yeah, I mean, I'm old. If you're old enough like us guys, I don't want to date myself or anybody else, but you remember that Manhattan should be underwater by now. Yep. You remember that the Keys, the Florida Keys, they're gone by now, right? As a matter of fact, they were supposed to be gone 20 years ago. All right. So it's like they keep changing these names. And now ultimately we have settled on climate change because global cooling didn't happen. We changed it to global warming. Global warming couldn't be supported. Now we're just changing it to this very generic climate change. And to me, the climate always changes. The climate will always change. And I'm with George. What was his name? The comedian, George Carlson. Yeah. I'm with him. How the hell arrogant? Yeah. How the hell arrogant are you that you think you're going to stop this planet from going through a cycle it just went through 10,000 years ago? Who the hell do you think you are? If she wants to swallow us all up, she's going to do it, and that's it. I mean, we're human. We're not gods.
There's a very interesting corollary to this, and George and I have talked about this, and I don't think anybody else really has talked about it. So I want to talk about it here, is that if certain countries don't behave in the right way, you will be climate sanctioned. Okay, it's a new way for the neoliberal order to maintain the status quo, its power, its hegemony. And what they're going to say, oh, but this country here, your carbon footprint. Okay, wait, sanction. Okay,
right.
This is the next step. This is the next step, because this whole, democracy versus autocracy, everybody laughs at it. Okay, as 500 people rot in DC prisons, and you're talking about democracy
right now.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
But no, I think it's a very, very important point.
And in science,
it should be emphasized. We had during the 90s the humanitarian intervention, or we have to prevent genocide. Obama had that thing, but the mass atrocity operations. He put Samantha Power in charge of this to work out how we can intervene to stop mass atrocities. But now we're getting a new consensus. How can we intervene to stop ecocide, so that we can move in and prevent countries from destroying their planet? And so this is now, always trying to find some new rationale to interfere in other countries' internal affairs. So, we went from we must stop genocide to we must stop, Bolsonaro. You already have that interfering with Brazil with, hey, look what he's doing to the Amazon. Therefore we must sanction him, because he has no right to do what he wants with the Amazon. We make that decision of what you can do with the Amazon or what you can't do. So this is becoming a kind of a new consensus of how we can actually coerce other countries.
And let me play. This is Israel. I'm going to play first, simply because they took the lead on vaccinations. All right, and yet these are all protests within the last few days. They're ongoing. Israel's, I believe, now is for this last weekend. This clip is from. This is now the 13th or 15th in a row where there have been mass crowds protesting not just mandates, but the mitigation policies and that Israel has put in place. And if I grabbed them from the internet, but some of them couldn't be sourced. be happy to throw that tag in on YouTube for people if I miss them. So just a real quick shout out. If you don't get a hat tip, and you should have, get in touch with us and we'll throw the little card up on YouTube so you get your hat tip. All right. All right. Here's Israel. All right, and now let's go to Milan, Italy. I'm not going to leave that over George forever. All right, but as I was right down to say, big crowd. All right, here is New Zealand, which I believe is Laura's personal favorite because the Samoans are getting in on the action. Oh, wow, there's some rowdy puppies.
Yeah, that's my favorite too. I like that.
Yeah, that reminded me of some stuff Laura and I once saw. That I've seen him do it, and it's really cool. Like the traditional dances and stuff. It's really cool, and it comes from the war cry, from tribal war cries, and man, I love that stuff. So does Laura's like. I love watching men gear up for battle, and that's what it looks like. And here's Switzerland, which again has been now, weeks and weeks and weeks of this. And Switzerland has been one of the most rational responding countries to this pandemic in general. Let's play Interesting why I picked that one, guys. That protest was huge during the day, and I was wondering if it would dwindle down at nighttime, as a lot of protests do. Still a huge crowd. These guys and girls, just marching up and down. And
what are they carrying on their shoulders?
It looked like urns or something, like water. You remember back in the day, it was punishment, like, to have to carry, you maybe have to stand in the court in the center of the. Yes.
It's a burden.
That's right. Exactly. It's, which is like, they're saying they're being treated like criminals, basically. And, this is a country, again, that is not like, and there was one in LA, just to give you the US a hat tip. Let me do this real quick. I know people are like, I'm just showing people that this is not some right-wing NASCAR driving fringe protests like the media continues to tell everybody is like the anti-vaxxers of the world. That's crazy. And in fact, many of these groups in LA, these are Democratic voters and Democratic constituencies. And here they are because they thought they were going to get a pass.
Something happened here, but it ain't exactly.
Talk about the
60s. Appropriate music.
That's right. And they're even throwing it back to the 60s counterculture. The protests during, obviously, another tumultuous time in the United States. This is, like you said, it's a weird problem, Peter, because you have a lot of people who say, you know what, I'll do what I think is my part. But I think as we get on, and I can't wait to get back in the field because we're going to ask again how many of those people did get vaccinated with the booster. And then whether or not that I'm not getting the damn booster number has changed, because in 9 months almost of tracking, the percentage of people who said they will not get even the first two was relatively, it maybe ticked down a few, which we attributed. It still was anywhere between 2 and 10 to 25% of the population. And we attributed that decline to mandates. So you were forced to do it or you had to lose your job. that's not the same as convincing people this is a good product for you. And we know that because when we ask, how much trust do you have in the safety and the efficacy of this vaccine, of the mRNA vaccines? The percentage of people who don't have trust, whether it's not a lot or none at all, is higher than the percentage of people who say that they have not been vaccinated and will not be, which tells us 1 in 10 at least have been forced into vaccination.
But Richard, but I think what's important here is that none of us are scientists, though George is one of the smartest people I've ever known. But this tells us more. This is more of a reflection on our political leaders. It's not a reflection on the vaccine itself, okay? Because what people are saying is that, you know, you have taken it upon yourself to make decisions about our lives. You know, you may, in most cases, be elected officials, so we cut you some slack here. But people believe you're abusing that because you know we don't trust. It's not that we don't trust the vaccines per se. We don't trust you anymore. Okay, and if you look at all of the protests, I mean, obviously we can't get anything detailed just by looking at those videos here. But I would wager quite heavily, actually, that these are middle-class people, small entrepreneurs, their own businesses. They're the ones that are getting trampled by this, okay? I'm very interested in, because there's a class issue in this whole protest movement when it comes to these vaccines, okay? So leadership is, they're just vacated the stage because no one trusts them anymore, nor should they, okay? And then if your livelihood is constantly being trampled upon, based on, you know, the level of competency that you see in these leaders, I mean, that would drive a lot of people out to protest.
Right, and I think that's the problem, that, you know, you take the vaccine, and now you're still sitting with a mask on, and now apparently, even if you've taken the vaccine, not only can you still get COVID, you can even transmit COVID. So therefore, the question asks, well, why exactly did I take the vaccine, and why am I being asked to take a booster shot when it obviously doesn't do any good? I mean, if I can, you know, infect somebody else, then what the hell have I done this for? And I think that's really the problem, that none of this makes any real sense. I mean, Biden comes along and denounces the unvaccinated, even as he's wearing a mask while he's already had the booster shot. Well, why, why are the unvaccinated supposed to now take the vaccine if it isn't going to do anything for them, if they're in as much danger from the vaccinated as they are from the unvaccinated? So the arguments just don't make any sense. And so therefore, because the arguments don't make sense, let's use coercion.
That's right.
Vaccine, you lose your job. You don't take a vaccine, no restaurant for you, no cinema, no theater for you. That's all you can do, because when the logic fails, all you've got is force.
That's right.
You know, George, you really put in, and this public poll that we're going to do, I want to add, somebody on Local suggested it, and I want to figure out how to do it, because I want to know how many parents will pull their kids out of the school system if they are forced to give their kids the vaccine. Right now, I can see Gavin Newsom is already having problems with his order. This could really collapse the public school system if there's enough people, and because they're already running on a shoestring. And I see that is, they get paid based on attendance. Yes. Laura knows this all too well. She dealt with that budget in Florida. You know, that enrollment in the first 10 days is how much money you're getting. And if you watch a bunch of people get pulled out of your school, and next year you don't have those numbers, you could find yourself in deep trouble. But basically, like George was saying, there are these diehard people who choose, I think, to ignore it. And that's when you'll hear them make the argument, because what George was saying about the arguments not making sense is important, because only that leaves now a fringe kind of fanatical, pro everything mitigation group of people who, no matter what, will believe everything these people say, against the vast majority who do not. And they have an outsized voice. And I don't know. I mean, because I run into these people all the time. What they'll tell you is, well, that's because everyone's not vaccinated. That is not how this works. And they don't seem to understand that, right? If everyone got vaccinated, the difference between polio, measles, mumps, right? Yeah. If everyone got vaccinated from COVID, everybody, you would still get COVID.
That's
because
right.
the variants would they're different. It's not like polio where it's going to mutate into something that leaks out of the vaccine, and that's not only likely, but that's how the virus actually behaves. That's the nature of the virus. This is what they don't get. That group, I think most 100%, like George is saying, and why we have these problems, they do get that. Like the good old fashioned, what's his name? The cable guy tweeted when he said it, and it sticks in my mind because he said it so plainly. I think this is how every average working American would think. Joe Biden says this is the fault of the unvaccinated. We have to protect the vaccinated from them, right? And he just tweeted, somebody basically said never in the history of science and of vaccinations. Like, that is a statement you would never have heard before. This is the first time anyone's making an argument like that. And to everyday working people, I think they just kind of instinctively, like Larry the Cable Guy, the hell are you talking about? That doesn't make sense, and I've never heard of that before.
And what does make sense and makes sense to everyone is that why should the burden be on me when OSHA is getting involved in workplaces, which of course, if you look at OSHA's mandate, it's things already in the workplace, not things that are brought into it. Okay, it's like nails and hammers and all, equipment and things like that. And so the burden goes on individuals working in companies. So are you getting free time off to get a test? Probably not. So you get your wages docked. You're already hesitant because you don't understand the messaging that's coming on. I mean, the burden always falls down on working people. That's where the burden is.
Yep.
Yeah, George, you want to answer that? Because I would just
No,
say
I think that's
where I think Thomas and Alito and some of these cases make it to them. Right. I think this is where those conservatives are going to have a problem. Yeah. And even like the restaurants, guys, who's in charge of imposing or enforcing the mandates that, with the restaurants and the employers? Yeah, I think that is where Alito and Thomas are going to say this is different. This changes the relationship, between the state. But go ahead, George. Go ahead.
No, I think it's absolutely right. It falls on working people because look at the restaurants. I mean, restaurants, barely survive. They're just, above the mark.
Yeah, in the good times.
Yeah, and even the most expensive restaurants, they barely survive. So the moment you start imposing these kinds of restrictions, you say, well, you have to ask for people to show their vaccine certificate. They know that their customers are just not going to show up. So that's it. They're in real trouble, and it goes throughout. If you haven't been vaccinated, you're going to have difficulties getting access to buildings. Well, that's going to affect your business right away. So it's an amazing thing that you're imposing this mandate on working people, and it's working people who are being demonized. And I think it's just an amazing phenomenon, and particularly as none of these remedies that have been advocated have been shown to be successful. I mean, the masks have not been shown to be have done nothing. I mean, there's absolutely no evidence that any of these masks do anything. And and we've already talked about the vaccine. What about the lockdowns? The devastating effect the lockdowns have. There's no evidence that the lockdowns did anything. So it's like in fact, all the evidence.
All the evidence to the contrary.
Yeah.
Exactly. All the evidence. JP Morgan. All the people have looked at this.
Yeah. This was the first pandemic where healthy people were sequestered.
Exactly.
In pandemics, you don't sequester healthy people.
Right. Exactly.
Speaking of the history, first in the history ever. I mean, you go back to antiquity. Right. You will never find an instance like that when a government, the authority, basically shut down commerce by mandate, shut down commerce and isolated healthy people. That's not the same as quarantine. Never before in the history of civilization can you find a reaction like this. And people keep saying, well, no, we did this when the flu happened. We did not force the shutting down of commerce, the stopping of religious ceremonies, the burying of families, on and on and on. I mean, I could just keep going. That never happened. This is we have a playbook for pandemics, for global pandemics. We have used it before in the past. This time, for some strange reason, and I think his name is Donald J. Trump, this time we just burned, we burned the playbook, rewrote a new one at the expense to hundreds of millions of people. I don't think it's possible to calculate the negative impacts from that lockdown yet. The suicide rates that have gone up, child obesity a couple weeks ago. I think we all saw that coming. The loss of education, potentially up to 30% of what a child would earn over their lifetime from loss of that education period.
Right.
I believe those numbers. I have 2 children. That was a waste of a year and a half of their life.
That's right. And again, I mean, it's a point I made earlier about, children having to wear masks 8 hours a day. We don't know the effect of that. I mean, what effect does it have on growing children that they're not able to breathe oxygen for 8 hours a day, just breathing in their own germs 8 hours a day, breathing in carbon dioxide? We don't know what the long-term effects on their health and their development will be. So, all of these are just a part of this ridiculous, drastic measures these people have put forward.
I don't know if you guys saw it, but it was one of the most horrific things I've ever seen in my life. I think it was carried on Tucker, where this young girl, I think she was like 8 or 9 years old. She had some kind of Down syndrome.
Yes,
and
the father was on.
They masked her like a dog.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, and here's a young girl that has obviously challenging health issues. She breathes through her mouth, not through her nose. And they mask her up the way they tied it on the back of her head. Yeah. I mean, I was horrified. What kind of
the governor went nuts. DeSantis went nuts.
Children to teachers to take care of them, and she gets off the school bus and she's in that condition. That's child abuse. There's nothing less.
It is child abuse. And honestly, George was talking about the impact health wise, but the UK, which I got in trouble last time talking about, their part of their reasoning was also developmental issues socially and otherwise. Our kids are constantly telling us they can't see or understand their teachers' facial expressions. They never know when they're kidding or not. That kids are actually getting into like stupid little arguments because they don't know if someone is making a wisecrack comment to be mean or if they're joking. And it leads to added distraction. There is going to be an issue for this where it's one more piece of a puzzle. The era of technology and the distancing of human relationships, we're destroying the human connection. We're making people less humane, guys.
Different language.
Yeah, it's like a totally different language. Right. Communication is overwhelmingly body language. Right. So, and Laura's over here, giving me her side of it. But she's right. I mean, overwhelmingly body language is it. And we're teaching ourselves to be much colder and more callous, and we're going to raise essentially a generation of drone-like kids who are less less educated in what they should have been, because they've lost so much, but also less feeling and connected. They already have all of these problems with technology at their fingertips. It's Facebook instead of pen pals, and over time, I don't like the direction we're headed, because that's when, humanity has to have that human connection, or else we can become very brutal. And
this is why, I wonder, Richard, whether you can answer the question: why haven't more politicians seized on this issue? And basically just batten onto this and say right to power on that, because even the populists, like let's say Viktor Orban, he hasn't really, he's gone along with the consensus on COVID. Even Peter, about Putin. I mean, Russia's pretty much gone along with the consensus. I mean, you think of, let's say, France. I mean, Marine Le Pen hasn't seized on this issue. So it's kind of strange that there isn't someone who says, all of the things that you, Richard, were just saying a moment ago, and saying, yeah, we need to break free of this nonsense. I mean, I don't know. I'm just curious why no one has seized on this issue.
Well, George, before Richard answers,
that's a great question. Go ahead, Pete. Go ahead.
The Russian example here. I mean, what they do is they suggest, okay?
Yeah.
But they don't enforce, okay? There's not enforce. I mean, some shops, they'll have a sign right next to the cash register. If you don't have a mask on, you can't buy your purchase. But you can walk around the store all you want. And so it's kind of farcical. People go up and they put a mask in front, and they buy something. And I mean, I find it rather ridiculous, okay? But
Lunacy.
it's
Yeah.
not punitive. It's not punitive, okay? There's because it's not punitive, it's not political. It doesn't mean people don't talk about it. People talk about it a lot, okay? And what they talk about is the Sputnik vaccine? Can I get a visa to go to this country? Will our vaccine be recognized? And because of all of the anti-Russian sentiment, nope. The Sputnik one's a fake. It doesn't work. We don't. And see, that's what they think about here. And so it depends on if these mandates and restrictions have punitive measures attached to them.
Right.
But that's the point. I mean, in many countries, it is punitive. I mean, let's say in France, there's going to be an election in less than 6 months. It's been very punitive in France, and I'm surprised why the figures on the right, Marine Le Pen, this Eric Zemmour, who are challenging Macron, why they haven't done more with this issue. To me, it seems like an open lane, but nonetheless, they haven't done it. Why hasn't Salvini, another populist on the right, he hasn't really seized on this issue? That's kind of my question, which I don't have an answer to.
Well, I think
I don't either. I don't either.
Well,
you would think that would be the natural way.
But I think I have an answer, and it's probably not a good one, but I think it's the one that probably fits, is that something that we've all said before. I mean, up until recently, there wasn't a big debate about these kinds of things. Okay. I mean,
yeah.
That was the consensus.
It's not a priority.
No, but it's like, okay, well, what do the scientists say? Okay, and then you would go, okay, that this is bad for you, this is good for you, and we kind of go along with it because we didn't have any reason not to. Now there's so much confusion, and I think there is hesitation, because they're not they didn't study viruses at universities, and I think a lot of people are hesitant in the politicians that George mentioned. I think they're a little hesitant because people say, well, what are you, a scientist? Okay, I think that's what kind of pushes them back a little bit. I agree, it's an open lane, but I think people are much more hesitant. They tread there a lot more slowly than it would be under other issues. That's why I think this is so pernicious, because it's about science. I'm not a scientist. George and I, if you want to talk, anyone wants to talk to us about oil and gas and coal and sea lanes and international law, we could talk for hours, okay? But when it comes to this, well, we just have to go with our own experience. It's like, you say this, but the result is this. You don't do this, but you make that's the only thing we can draw from.
Right.
I think too, though, George, it's just like a loss of priority. I don't think we think about things like that enough anymore. Maybe we have this, on the issue of technology and what that is doing to human connection, right, and human relationships. We didn't have a discussion with that either. We just raced into it. Now the genie's out of the bottle, and whatever responsible or way to move forward that could preserve the good things about human nature. I think that's pretty much tough crap now, right? I mean, it's over. It's happened. And I think Peter is dead on, because everybody just initially wanted to pay attention to, well, what do public health officials say about this? What are they saying we have to do? And they wouldn't even say that if it wasn't such a serious issue, if it wasn't such a serious situation. So I guess I'm going to defer to their expertise, and we got to stop doing that crap. I don't know how many times I told people in the beginning, they're like, well, what do you think, you're a doctor? No, but I remember my doctors and other people's doctors telling me, telling the entire Midwest that OxyContin was perfectly safe. Right? So, I mean, what the hell is wrong with you people? I mean, how many times you got to be lied to by G-men, men in white coats or women in white coats or in black robes before you realize they're just freaking human beings, and they're just as susceptible to corruption, and they're just as flawed and fallible as you. So once upon a time,
and I think another aspect,
I think we had healthy skepticism, and we don't have it now.
That's right. And I think particularly with politicians, they are afraid of getting blamed for deaths. I think hey, there's a spike in deaths, boom, who's at fault? Hey, well, it's Viktor Orban.
Look
Because
at Ron DeSantis.
yeah, exactly. So I think they're afraid. I mean, they saw what happened to Trump. They said, oh, Trump, he personally is responsible for 500,000 deaths of Americans. I mean, that's it. He himself personally. And I think politicians are really afraid of that accusation because, in a way, people are persuaded by, well, that's it. He didn't impose the mandates. And now, all these people are dead. So I think that there's a certain cowardice that even brave politicians like Orban are trying to go there.
But what would be brave, and it would, really brave, is to say what's true, historically true, scientifically true, is that in pandemics, people die.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And what we need to do, the adults at the table, so we have to manage it. We have to do the best we can because people will die. Okay. It's
without politics, though, Peter. Without politics, there are two things. There are two things I want to give insight.
We need a philosopher king. We need a philosopher.
That's right, a philosopher, Plato's philosopher king. That's exactly what we need. I'll tell you because there are two insights I want to give people. One is Dr. Fauci told Donald Trump that if we did not do this, 500,000 people would die. 500,000 people died because, sadly, Peter is right. People die during pandemics. And then secondly, Joe Biden's campaign advisor, now his top man, Ron Klain, who was a source to a story for Fox News, they refused to name him on the record. It was Ron himself who said, yeah, the polls may be close, but wait until there's a couple 100,000 body bags. He wanted people to die in that story. That the Biden campaign was waiting for the summer and the body count to pile up. That's what it was. Sick. So we can't do the job. We can't get to a place like we're talking about getting to if we really have that level of political cynicism polluting it. It's not possible. They were salivating over the idea of hundreds of thousands of death toll numbers, on the COVID tracker for CNN to put up. Think about how evil that is. Yeah. Think about what we're talking about. I don't think 30 years ago, 40 years ago, we're just different now, guys. I think politically we were just different now. I don't know that too many people like Pat Goodell, who would have been in a similar position for Walter Mondale or what's his name for Jimmy Carter. I don't think they would have cheered hundreds of thousands of dead people in the hopes that it turns around their poll numbers. I just don't buy that. Those were different men.
Hundreds of thousands of their own citizens, okay? And George and I...
Their own fellow citizens.
The body count of foreigners, that always plays into political calculus. But your own people here, that is something very different. What I think is different, and it's very pernicious, is this neoliberal ideology. It plays for keeps, and it will do anything to maintain power. I mean, for the Democrats, the pandemic was a godsend until they got power, okay? And George and I talked about this ad nauseum, okay, before the election. So, this is a very pernicious attitude. This is a blood sport, and it looks for complete annihilation. It's not interested in negotiation at all. That's why George and I started the Gaggle.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, you've got these, look, Pelosi, we've been talking about this before. She is ruthless. They are absolutely ruthless. And I have to say, the Democrats are led, because what you were saying a moment ago, Richard, it wasn't true a generation ago. Well, I remember at the time of the Oklahoma City bombing, Bill Clinton seized on that and blamed the Republicans. Boom. Republicans are actually responsible for that. Yeah, but Bill Clinton, I think, is a very scummy character. I don't think Jimmy Carter would have done it. I don't think Hubert Humphrey or George McGovern would have done it, but Bill Clinton did.
Like genocidal numbers, George, like cheerleading for genocidal numbers. He said, and I don't have to dig that up and get that exact quote, but it was, if I'm not exact, I'm barely off. They were asking them, well, it looks like the president is actually coming back a little bit strongly, because what had happened was he ended the shutdown. The economy was rebounding, as we were shown with the charts before, and the poll numbers actually began to tighten, right? and they said, well, it's a long way to go. Let's see what happens to his poll numbers when there are a couple 100,000 body bags. And then he laughed.
Yeah. No,
Who
that
the hell?
was the thing. Yeah. I mean, it's
And that was, from my understanding, that was Ron Klain, that anonymous source in Fox.
You're just proving our point. You're just proving our point. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, Biden did that. He did that in those debates. He absolutely said, yeah, Trump is personally responsible for the deaths of 500,000 Americans. I mean, can you imagine the communists? Like, what a disgusting thing that is to say. That here's a pandemic, a virus nobody knew anything about, and Biden didn't even care where it came from. But to say that the president is personally responsible for the death of 500,000 Americans, I mean, that's the worst kind of demagoguery.
Richard, I would never have considered blaming Obama. I would never have considered blaming Obama for H1N1, which I caught. I contracted because I went to the VA for something totally unrelated. They didn't have any beds. I had to stay. There wasn't enough beds. They stuck me in a room with an older gentleman who was infected badly. He looked like he was dying. And sure as hell enough, I had my son was only 4 months old, maybe at the time. So I wasn't, once they realized what they had done, I wasn't legally allowed to leave. They kept me there. I didn't get Tamiflu, which was for the swine flu, for 48 hours. So, I mean, it was no joke. The swine flu was no joke. I felt, honestly, the swine flu I felt was worse for me than COVID. I was a young, healthy guy, but my fever was bad. It was 104. It was bad. I was hallucinating. But I never thought to blame Obama, even though the nurse at Malcolm Randall Veterans Hospital, even though the nurse there told me that they just were not prepared. They were not given enough resources, did not have enough beds. I just figured, that's life. That's government. That's
Richard,
I didn't blame Barack Obama.
But there was something that was about to happen that wasn't in play when you had that illness. And it's 2 words: Donald Trump. Okay? Yep. That changes the calculus completely. True. Okay?
It's so true. No, all gloves were off. All rules were.
I mean, George and I don't get any credit, or hardly any credit, for our breakdown of the Russiagate hoax. We did it from the very, very beginning. We have never gotten anything wrong. We might have speculated a little bit, maybe a little too far sometimes, but given the facts that we had, we got it right. We got it really right. Okay, I'm really proud of our. Okay.
You know what? That's 100% true. And I'm going to give you a hat tip on that right now, which is why, I remember how we even started watching you. I mean, Robert was looking for people who were sane. And then he was like, hey, you got to check out these guys at the Gaggle. And that's how that really even unfolded. And you know what it came down to? You guys have experience in that area. Anyone who looked right off the bat at the Steele dossier, who has any experience remotely, knew that was not an intelligence product. That was opposition garbage research. It wasn't formatted. It didn't read like one. The vocabulary was all off. The terminology was all. Anybody who had any experience,
the spelling was off. The way they dated, the dating process was off. Misspellings.
Right. Yeah. No, that's right. And you were talking about how Morgan Ortagus challenged. What's his name? Adam Schiff yesterday. I don't think she was that effective. Schiff,
as much as she could have been. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I didn't know people would lie to Steele. I didn't know people would lie to the FBI. Well, I mean, if you're the ranking Democrat on that intelligence committee, and you can't differentiate nonsense,
not plausible,
from a serious intelligence product. If you believe your rubbish like Carter Page would get 19% of Rosneft, was it Gazprom? I can't remember. Was it Gazprom?
Right.
Rosneft, 19%. If you believe nonsense like that, then you're a complete nitwit.
But George
went on to this for 3 years.
But Radcliffe informs Schiff of his error.
Yes.
This is the intelligence here. And
Radcliffe did that.
Lied.
Yeah, John.
He simply lied. Okay.
And that's the issue with the media.
Right.
The issue with the media, though, guys, she should, if she's going to be the one who is interviewing the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, the Permanent Select Committee on Russia, all of that, if she's going to be the one to sit down with that man and interview, you better damn well know what you're talking about. All right? I mean, everybody, she got shafted from Fox and now is at CBS, but Catherine Herridge, very, very, whether you like it or not, very experienced in the intelligence world and foreign policy, took one look at that dossier and told Bret Baier, this doesn't look real to me. This does not look like an intelligence document. What happened to her? Shipped off to CBS News for no one, for whatever reason, true or not. But, it shouldn't be people like The View who talk to this man about this stuff. Natasha Bertrand, who is willing to herself for a story, should not be the one taking these stories and giving them in the Politico. These people thought that they were getting sources. What they didn't understand is they were their assets. And they either got played because, like, I think, Peter, now is the opportune time for that word. They're like ideologically possessed and they're just dying to get on their good side. They're dying to get a story. It hurts Donald Trump. They can't stand Donald Trump. So all caution goes to the wind. It's crazy. They should never have been on those beats. Never.
Since you brought up ideologically possessed, we'll run with it.
And Maggie Hamerman is ideologically possessed. There's no damn way she didn't know that dossier was funded by the Clintons.
They all knew it was a sack of you-know-what. They knew it. But the cause was worthy. And they still feel that way today.
Right.
We got rid of him, didn't we? Shouldn't you be happy? Shouldn't you congratulate us? Shouldn't you elevate us? Okay.
Right.
They haven't gotten their Pulitzers taken back yet. They still,
but they're still lying about it.
They still got their Pulitzers.
Right. And
they still got their Pulitzers.
But they're still lying about it because the New York Times says in every story, the Steele dossier was peripheral to Russiagate. It was at the heart of Russiagate. It was at the heart of the FBI investigation. And Mueller simply took over the FBI investigation. It was at the very heart of it. Now, it didn't play much of a part in the report because by then, in 2019, they really didn't. They already knew that the Steele dossier was a pile of
garbage.
To say, you know what? But it was at the heart of it. From the New York Times to go on peddling and saying, well, it was a peripheral. Well, if that was peripheral, what was central? I mean, well, what would they say is central? That ridiculous the Trump Tower meeting that for 20 minutes. So I mean, but you can see how they continue to lie about this even after all of that has been found out.
They're trying to throw the dossier and Rachel Maddow under the bus. And they're thinking, this is a cancer that's going to spread and kill credibility. I'm going to excise it with Maddow and the Steele dossier.
I don't think so. I disagree.
That's not going to work.
I disagree. I think Rachel Maddow, her following is going to say, thank you, Rachel. Thank you for doing
right. But I mean, like the New York Times. They're going to try to castigate her and throw her off. And just kind of say, that was relegated to like Rachel Maddow. We didn't really put, like George said, this was separate reporting, but that's not true. And everybody knows it's not going to work, but they're trying it. They are. You saw that article in the Times the other day.
But the point is mission accomplished. Okay, again,
yes, you're right.
Ideological possession. It doesn't matter what the truth is. Truth is relative anyway. Truth is what I want it to be. Okay,
that's right.
This is what their brain and their morality has been turned into scrambled eggs. Okay,
that's so true, Peter.
Earlier, and I know this sounds really, really esoteric, but George and I are onto something. And I don't want to go into great length because we did a separate video on it. But the special American envoy to the West Balkans showed up this week in Belgrade, and there is a war brewing there. There is definitely a war brewing there, and the U.S. is trying to push out the EU, trying to impose itself, and we see a replay of the 1990s with the breakup of Yugoslavia.
Why am I saying this?
Because we got another distraction here. Another distraction. What was my first words to you, George, yesterday when I talked about it? A splendid little war. Okay,
a splendid little war.
All right. No, I think it's we talked about this, and I'm going to talk about this because I'm going to be doing a live stream later today on locals. But all of the Balkans alumni who were there with the Clintons in the 90s, and this became a central plank of the Clintons' foreign policy, they're all there. You know, Blinken, Biden, Newland, they're all there, and they all remember how great it was to distract Americans' attention from Clinton's sordid escapades with this, we're going into the Balkans to rescue Albanian damsels in distress, or Muslims who are being persecuted. Our hearts beat for the Muslims of Bosnia. So, they're all there. They remember these slogans, and the slogans are coming back.
It's 1:10. Let me just say this, and then I'll give you guys a chance to tell them when to catch that live stream, because I know a lot of people will love that. But I'll just say this on that. Let them. Because they're so damn incompetent, they're going to ruin it. And two, what they don't realize is that Bill Clinton had something they don't, a prosperity. And Americans were willing to say, you know what? I'm making good bank over here. Bomb Slobodan. I don't care who the guy's got under his desk. You know what I mean? I don't care, whatever, as long as it doesn't impact me.
Good point.
They're not happy right now. Bill Clinton had Americans happy. He never won a majority of the vote, but he had a majority of people saying, I'm all right with the economy. I think it's okay. I think we're doing okay. And if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. Just don't hurt any Americans, and he did it by the air, and just, bombed. This team is stupid or not, maybe they're smart with what they know they want, but look at Afghanistan. Look at how they've handled everything. The Abraham Accords. These are not competent people. So let that, it's hard when the president is what Joe Biden is, which is gone. He's out of town. He's not coming back. So normally a White House little fight between these kind of groups, the State Department, the Pentagon, they argue if they want the presidency here. Right now, they're just arguing with each other because nobody's listening. The president, you can talk to the president all you want. He's just going to drool a little bit, ask for another saltine cracker, and what time he gets his Jell-O pudding in his pill, and then that's it. So, that's why I think it's very hard to juggle.
Or have an accident in the Vatican. Okay.
Jeez, guys. I mean, can it get any worse for us? Can it get the American population is just having one total embarrassment after another.
I did a recording of Crosstalk yesterday, and we were talking about January 6th, and we had one of the Republican pundits, and I mean, this guy was he was a real slugger, and I wanted to focus just on January 6th, and he went down the Vatican pooper. He had,
oh my God.
He had to say it.
I'll tell you what. I would not be surprised, and I don't think we've seen the end of this. I mean, it's only going to go downhill for Joe Biden ever since, and I'll do this, and then I swear I'll kick it off to you. This was it. This was the beginning of the end when your president does this publicly. Don't forget the salute after you make an ass out of yourself.
I think the soundtrack has been altered. I have this very strong. Can't you hear Kamala cackling in the background?
We got out. We took that out. We got this version from CBS. Actually, they took it out. All right. Once you start to fall up steps, and look, he was going to help him up the stairs anyway. All the staff knows the deal. They were afraid he couldn't make it up those damn steps. You can see the guy go over in concern, right? But he doesn't want to be, made to look weak in public. So he tried to do it. He got a little bit overconfident, started going a little bit too quick, and fell like grandpa. I mean, that's what happens. I mean, anybody have grandparents? You know where this guy's at. When he decided he was going to run in Wilmington, Delaware, I won't forget it. They take him out of the side of the building. He got no coverage at this point. I see him come out of the side of the building, and they start going down the ramp. All right? Like, not the stairs, the ramp. and he's doing what I called on Twitter the geriatric shuffle. Like, and that's why I started calling him Geriatric Joe. Like, he looked very old and frail to me. And the last time I think I had seen him, he was vice president and he was still kind of sharp, you know. And this was one of the worst disservices the media has done to this country. That they haven't hit. I think they have. This is like hiding from the country that Roosevelt has polio level bad. I really do. And for those of you who think the media wouldn't do that, guess what? They did it for their last favorite Democratic president, and they did it for JFK, who they knew damn well had problems.
JFK,
If a Democrat has mental or physical issues, they will absolutely cover up for it. A Republican, he gets mocked like Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. If they fabricated stuff with Donald Trump, at least with Reagan after the shooting, there were some legitimate concerns. I mean, anyone that age takes a bullet. It takes a toll on you. But with Donald Trump, they just fabricated the hell out of this stuff. But with Democrats, they will hide serious disease, serious incompetence. They'll hide all that from you, ladies and gentlemen.
Or bad behavior.
Bad behavior. Like Johnson.
If you look at how do Americans look upon their president? I mean, their president is now a laughing stock. I mean, you have the British press, which is just making hay out of this whole thing about Camilla Parker Bowles complaining about the president's noisy emission of gas. I mean, you can't have people around the world laughing at the American president because he's
can't do it
emitting gas. And I think Americans really, they want their leader, to be at least somewhat have at least some kind of a swagger about him. Even
that's what.
So Joe,
George, just gonna say.
President Xi and Putin heard about this, and we're not going to Glasgow. No. Don't want to be around.
That's what Laura said. She was like, listen, if you really care about how things are going to go, everybody should send him some Depends so these people don't avoid him. Like that, Like, geez, the last time did you hear what happened to the Pope? The guy crapped himself in front of the poor guy. I'm not going to Glasgow. I'm not sitting next to him. Knowing my luck, I'll be the one who draws the damn card. No.
And in the West Wing, somebody has Pampers control.
Oh, God.
Okay, right.
This is where we are, ladies and gentlemen. This is where we are.
Remember when George H.W. Bush was visiting Japan? He collapsed at that state banquet.
Oh, yeah.
And then his head was kind of in the Japanese prime minister's lap. That damaged Bush. That he never recovered from that. That image.
I forgot all about that.
The Japanese prime minister holding up his head. I mean, boy, America looked very weak at that moment.
And it took away some of his argument against his, which obviously led to some, obviously he was defeated, but it took away some of his argument, like, don't give this newcomer with no experience on the world stage, I'm the war winner and I'm the hero. That really, when you look that weak, it takes it to take the wind right out of your sails.
Absolutely.
But go ahead, guys, tell people, because I know we ran really late. Tell people, and I appreciate you sticking around, but I'm sure people got a heart out. So tell people where to check out their live stream again today, because that sounds very interesting.
The Gaggle.locals.com. How does Rob say it? The Gaggle.locals.com at 3 p.m.
That was good.
Yeah, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So 3 p.m. And we're going to talk about the Biden administration's capers in the Balkans and what they have in mind there.
And one more plug.
Really cool. Go ahead. Do your
George and I do a super chat on YouTube at 12 o'clock Eastern time on Saturday. Everyone is welcomed. And my signing off on that particular product is please watch us, because it could always be the last one. Okay, so
you never know, right? And Peter, you want to tell people about Crosstalk? That was fun.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're an honored guest, and you come back anytime you want. And considering the escapades of the Biden administration, we're going to need you. But Richard was on last week. We had a really good time. You took on one of the hardcore Democrats, a real ideological possessed person. Did you like how I ended the program? I said, "Isn't Joe an old segregationist?"
And she was like fighting history, Peter. It's like, What are you talking about? Now he's a segregationist? No, he was 40 years ago. What are you talking about? This is known fact. Did you not know, lady, that he was a segregationist? And I was, look, she came across, I think I did all right with there, like how I handled it, because normally I'm a little fiery, but you got to be, you got to handle people like her a little bit different, So it was fun to be between, I told you this, Peter, I'll tell everybody else. It's fun to be the pollster between two cheerleaders. Because then I get to just sit there and just say, these are the numbers.
These are the numbers.
These are the numbers. And by the way, about 4 days later, I was totally vindicated. Totally vindicated. Once again.
We'll end on this. What was really fun about it is that it just naturally, we fell into a tag team. Okay. I mean, it wasn't my plan, but that's how it actually worked. Because basically, my idea is, give the numbers. Okay. I don't need to talk. You tell me. Okay. It worked really well.
Well, as always, guys.
Richard,
go ahead.
And remember, Richard, you are our guest, I think, in 2 weeks' time or something like that. So, you'll be the guest of the Gaggle. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I look forward to it, guys. As always, thanks for coming by. It's always a great time. Sorry to hold you over again, but it was good stuff. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks. I'll see you later tonight because I'm going to check that out. But as always, folks, thanks for joining us. Be safe, all right?
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Guys, everybody, check out the Gaggle. That's Peter and George from the Gaggle. We do this once a month on Inside the Numbers, and then I go on the Gaggle once a month. It's always fantastic conversation and basically can't miss kind of stuff. They hung out for 20 minutes past when they were supposed to, and that is tough in this business. Believe me, you have that heart out. So I appreciate that, guys, as always. So we're going to get out of here. We're going to go locals. peoplespundit.locals.com, and they are thegaggle.locals.com. Locals, I want to talk to you about the poll, so I'm going to sneak in a live stream. It won't be like probably maybe a half hour or so, because I want to get some work done on it. But we set up some branching, we set up some logic, some piping, and I want to show you, what we got so far. It's already pretty big, so I saw a lot of suggestions for questions, and what I was looking for, folks, was suggestions for issues. But you did give some. I do like the question with the children being forced to be immunized. Basically adding COVID-19 to required immunizations for public schools. What would happen? How that would impact people? Would they take their kids out? Are they considering homeschooling? Yeah. Something like that. I like that a lot. And then I forgot who else was the one who did it with the mandating, whether they thought that would impact the economy and hurt the economy. Somewhere along that line. I really like those two. Everyone has great suggestions, but we're already up to, it's a big questionnaire already. And this is like getting that tracking for 2024. Right now, we can always change what questions later we ask. Right now, got to get the baseline on, we have the baseline from Labor Day, but we don't have a baseline for most important issues. And I have some statewide stuff that we've been doing. Some of, obviously, you've seen, some is privately for clients, but we need some national baselining on what people care about the most. Because one of the things you can show as a pollster afterward is, and it can help you get a feel for where the electorate, even though sometimes they want to be tight-lipped till the very end, you can still tell which way the wind is blowing when you look at priorities of voters and their views on, which comes closer to your view, which is most important. Somebody suggested ranked distribution with most important issue. We'll definitely add that. That is not really a problem. It's easy to add to an existing questionnaire. Just have to figure out how to display it well on MarketSite, because on our other tool, it can display very well. The problem is when we apply weighting variables, we can't then re-upload it to the other tool that really does rank distribution well. So two things are going to happen. Either MarketSite's going to give us a good way to do it, or I'm going to put it on Everviz high charts, Everviz/high charts, and we'll do it like that. All right. But I do think that's a great idea. Virginia, as an example, you would have saw public education coming up. Even though it may have started off in the 5th most important slot, you would have saw people rank it as number 2 beforehand a lot. And its ranked distribution score would have been higher than its overall single choice option percentage, right? So I don't know if that makes a lot of sense to people. It will when I explain it to you and show it to you. All right. So that was also a good suggestion. And we'll see once I add all of that. We'll see where it is and whether or not we can either remove something or add something or replace something. I don't know yet, but it's already pretty big. We're really getting to that line on that fatigue test, and I'm militant about that fatigue test. You go over that line. I have that line imposed for a reason. You go over that line and you start to lose critical demographic groups. They will not participate. And that's just a big. It'll skew the hell out of it. It will, because only high interest people who tend to skew one way are going to be represented correctly in those surveys. And that is not an accurate reflection of the electorate. All right. So with that, though, we'll check it out and we'll do that later. So keep an eye on it. All right. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Another great show. Consider joining the community if you're not a member already. peoplespundit.locals.com. Again, the guys at the Gaggle.locals.com. And then it's Wednesday already. We're like halfway there with the public polling project. I haven't checked it in a while. If we get pretty close, I'll do it. I'll fire it off if we come a little bit shy. But if you haven't already, thank you. If you haven't already, consider contributing to the public polling project. The link's in the description, both Rumble and YouTube. It's bigdatapol.com/public polling project. All right. And it will redirect you to one with hyphens, so I don't have to repeat it with hyphens all the time. All right, but that is what it is. If you haven't and can't, share it far and wide. All right, and see how many more of a base of support we can get, which will take a lot of burden off other people. But it's November 10th. I want to get this done before the holidays. The most obvious choice is this weekend, because next weekend we're going to be much closer to Black Friday and Thanksgiving, and it's just going to be a lot on people after that to do like a Christmas survey. But if we can get this one out, Laura and I may have a little bit of a Christmas present for the locals community. All right. So, but we got to get this one done before then. All right. Because it can't be like a week later. It has to be before. Yeah, all right. Timing. Yeah. Like a month, 4 weeks, 3 weeks even. But, where we could say this one's for November. This one's for December. Get what I'm saying? Wink, wink. All right. I don't want to give away the wink, wink. All right. All right, so I'm out. I'm going to go. Let me leave you with Bad Habit. As always, special thanks to the Bone Band. Follow me on Twitter still if you want, at peoples_pundit. On Getter, at peoplespundit. And if you like the video you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and that will let you know when we're going to go live. Getter users, hopefully we'll start streaming it there soon. But, of course, Rumble is where we're going with the locals page. So, locals viewers, give it a rumble. Give it a rumble, right? It's called the Rumble. Give it a rumble and subscribe if you don't already. There are 2 accounts. That's probably why some of you are missing it. Check out the People's Pundit. That's the one I put it on most. All right. So with that, I'm a ghost. See you soon. Thanks for watching. As always, catch you later, local.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head? Before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. There's rhythm in our love, it's impressive, excessive. You can't make this stuff up. My chest beats, it's restless, wakes the neighbors up above. Yeah, baby, come and show me love. Baby, come and show me love. Because you're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
And take a one-way ride, steal us away to find a place we can hide. It wouldn't take much to spear for knives to give into the need and leave it all behind.
'Cause I know that you know that I know that you own me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. 'Cause I know that show me